It's 2020 and currently the world is experiencing a crisis like never seen before. The coronavirus has rapidly spread across the globe, collapsing industries, hospitalising thousands of people and resulting in many fatalities. In this episode, our Training and Development Director, Damian Taylor, is taking on a deep dive journey into the investigation side of the Skadi business with our founder and managing director, Nic Corry.
Hello everybody and welcome to the Skadi podcast episode 8. As you can see today we've got a slight role reversal. I'll be asking questions of our founder and CIO Nic Corry, and actually we're going to talk today about the Skadi investigations business. So I think probably the best place to start, Nic, is the sort of history of how we as a firm moved into that investigations business, because I think when you started way back when, I think 8-9 years ago, that's not really the remit you had.
Yeah, that's right, Damian. I mean, Skadi. It is quite funny. So this business started as a very simple consultancy business, effectively a one-man band contracting, and working as an ex-trader within internal audit. And of course, my naivety, and this is probably shared with a lot of front office people, is that I actually had no idea what internal audit really was, because the only times I had encountered internal audit was through the investigations that they had conducted throughout my career. And actually investigations for internal audit is not really a mainstream part of their function. That's something they may get called into at various times. Their main business is about reviewing and assessing the strength and improving controls around a business. But the kind of work that I was doing for internal audit at the time at the bank where I was working really sort of played to my strengths, which were the kind of deep dive testing and really assessing the things that we've been told and figuring out how to test those. And it became, I think, quite apparent to myself, but also the people that I was working with, that I had I found that part of work really enjoyable. And as the trust grew and there were things that needed investigating at the time, then I started to be shown more of that kind of activity. And really over the years, move forward kind of 8 years now, and investigations is by far our biggest franchise. That's the thing that we do the most of, followed second by the review and control business, and then closely by the expert witness business. But it is interesting how all of those three things have an interrelationship. So what do I mean by that? Well, if you're looking at the review and control business and you're helping, a financial institution review businesses, put in the right controls, assess them, you're really getting, ahead of the problems, if you like. And then when you're in the investigations business, it's because a problem has occurred or is suspected to have occurred. And you're going in, looking at that. Perhaps your findings will feed back to the other control functions, the internal audit function, compliance function, the finance function, risk management function, whatever it happens to be, where they may need to strengthen the controls around a business. And then finally, of course, if you're operating in the expert witness arena, it's because the problems have already happened and people are now litigating as a result of the problems, if it's a case revolving around that kind of activity. And we have indeed been involved in those kind of cases, particularly things I can think of around, an example would be foreign exchange front running, for example. And again, that sort of activity, those kind of cases are can be very investigative, because you are looking at the kind of data, trade data, transaction data to assess what has happened.
Yeah, I was going to sort of talk to you about what sort of types of investigations can you get involved in. Obviously, you've talked about the data there. Can you give? I know it's tricky. You can't talk any too much detail about specific cases, but are they all very data dependent, or is actually a lot of it to do with the expertise that Skadi's picked up from either working in the front office themselves or just seeing how certain products evolve or trade, that we can add that value? So is it just knowledge, or is it kind of a lot of it deep dive into data?
It's a mixture of both, to be fair. I mean, certainly we wouldn't be on this playing field if we didn't have that knowledge and that experience. And I think that's what we really bring to the table with the people that we help. You know, we work with some very, very good, I mean, really good investigative functions that would be very, very well equipped, but they just don't have that deep, in-depth product knowledge, which is what you really need to really get in and get to the grips with the kind of challenges that they are presented with when they're presented with an investigation. Because, you know, quite often it's not just simple, you know, problems with a business or a product that you can face head on. Quite often these things are interwoven with the interrelationship with the front office, with the support functions that they've been, you know, using to support their business. There may be elements of, you know, people trying to persuade other functions to do a particular treatment that could be advantageous to the front office, for example. And also, you know, there is also that knowledge gap that could be exploited. So what do I mean by that? Well, for example, you may have front office practitioners that are a little bit economical with the features of a particular product, because if those features were known, then maybe it wouldn't qualify for the kind of accounting treatment, for example, that they're trying to persuade the finance function or the credit risk management function that they should be allowed to have on this product. And so it's that kind of thing. So when you have those kind of very complex situations, and often these things, well, they of course they have to be historical because you're looking back over something, but what I mean is they can be really quite historical. We can go back a number of years to look at a problem which may have had its foundation 6, 7, 8 years ago, but the problems won't have actually manifested until quite recently because, you know, the things that were wrong with the transaction haven't been uncovered till later on. So it's really about, you know, seeing those kind of interrelationships and drawing on your knowledge, drawing on your experience, but also going back to the time, putting yourself in the steps of those people that are operating at the time to look with their eyes. Because, of course, the other thing is very difficult to manage, and you know, we're all human, is that we have 20/20 hindsight when looking back at a situation. And really that you've got to give the benefit to the people that you are looking at the time, because, you know, in my experience, human beings are actually tend to be good. You know, I haven't met many, you know, bad actors. I have met some through our investigations, but generally what tends to happen is people make errors of judgment. People make mistakes. People make assumptions. They do human things. And it's those kind of consequences that you need to look at and try to assess, you know, well, what was the reason for doing that? Were they genuinely trying to do something wrong here? Or were they actually, you know, dealing, you know, as many of us are, with a completely new situation? So you've got to come in with, I think, a very unbiased approach, have open to all of the possibilities, but really draw upon your experience and knowledge that can really help you. And talking about the kind of investigations, it really depends on the situation at the time. I mean, one of the very first investigations that we helped out on, and we really, you know, took hold of the whole investigation and effectively given a blank piece of paper. A bank asked us to help them understand the weaknesses or potential weaknesses around a very high-profile benchmark fixing process. And in order to sample for that, to try and assess the times at when there might have been vulnerabilities, you know, we had to come up with an approach that would filter out, you know, 3 years worth of data. In this case, these were recordings of particular fixing calls that had taken place, to try and listen and see if there were, you know, the kind of fixing calls that may have caused problems. And to do that, we employed just statistical techniques to try and pick out calls that we thought would have been of interest around price activity. So again, just using standard, statistical standard deviations to see when there were big moves, when there were, highs in the price, when there were, recent lows in the price, to pick out the data points to sample with. So that was an example of something that started out as being really just a data analytical exercise. But then very swiftly, once you had those points selected and chosen, really moved into very much more a kind of qualitative approach where you're listening to the phone calls, you're trying to assess what is happening on the phone calls, because again, we're all ex-market practitioners, ex-market traders. We've been through a lot of different kinds of transaction processes, whether it's fixing calls, whether it's auctions, and so on and so forth, whether it's matchings. And so to have that experience and to listen to the kind of activity that's going on a call and really try to understand, just from the voices, you're not presented with the price action in that particular occasion. It was just purely, how people reacted. Were the fixes explored properly? Were the customers going to be treated fairly as a result of the approach that was conducted on the call? And that was an example of a very kind of, I suppose, as I say, data-heavy initial situation that moved very much into a qualitative process. And then, of course, there was the challenge of, illustrating your findings in that case. Again, so it's a presentational challenge. But a lot of the things that we are generally looking at tend to be whistleblower-led. So it's and the vast majority of that, and obviously we've just recently had the last episode of the Skadi podcast, devoted to the topic of whistleblowing, so that very crucial that people understand and know what whistleblowing is, because it's very integral to the kind of business that we conduct. And often in the case of whistleblowing, it's very, very difficult to unravel the allegations that are being made by an individual. There is a sort of, again, there is that knowledge gap, because, it's not like Skadi staff are being presented with the allegations. What tends to happen is the whistleblower calls the whistleblowing hotline, and then they have, a number of meetings, perhaps with the whistleblower, trying to understand and ascertain, the allegations that are being levelled. And it can be, quite challenging, depending on, again, what role the person has. Have they seen something from a particular side? Are they seeing something from all sides? So that is, again, for us, when we're coming into an investigation, it's often about trying to understand, in the first place, what is being alleged, what is being said here. And if that's the case, if these are the things that are being alleged, then, simply put, how are we going to tackle this problem? How do we get to the heart of what's being said? And again, the other challenge with whistleblowers is that sometimes, you do have access to the whistleblower, and that makes things a lot easier, because then you can come back and you can ask the questions, of them, about their particular allegations, etc. On other occasions, it may not be possible to speak to the whistleblower. Maybe the whistleblower needs to be protected. Maybe the whistleblower isn't wanting to come and have further conversations with people that they don't know and potentially mistrust. So then you don't have access to the whistleblower, and that can be particularly challenging, because, again, you have to take the allegations at face value and give them, the very best review that you can possibly do. So that's sorry, go on. You.
No, I was just no. That was I mean, it's something I don't know that much about. It's a very interesting summary of what you get up to. And actually, I was just wondering. Obviously, when you come in on day one of an investigation, there could be theoretically sort of terabytes worth of data that you have to go through. Some of it may be literally price data in a database. Some of it may be big email chains. Some of it may be what we call e-coms, I suppose, phone recorded lines. I mean, where do you start with that? Do you have do you use bits of software that can sort of start to break that down rapidly? How would you go about that?
It's a sampling challenge. It's like anything. You're trying to sift through vast quantities of data to arrive at the really relevant, the highly relevant information. And of course, as we said, the volume of data can be massive. If you're in an e-comms review, electronic communications review, looking at emails from a number of different people or custodians over a period of time, that can literally turn into millions of emails. And so what you do is a first sort of pass is have a number of search terms that are important to the matter at hand, that will go in and, as a first pass, a first level review, go through that universe and then present you with just the emails that are sensitive to those particular search terms. And I say also we've done it other ways where we've actually used algorithms without particular search terms, where we've actually gone in and trained the algorithm. So the algorithm has gone away and worked and just said, look, we're just going to present you with a number of emails. You tell us if you think this is sensitive. And after, whatever it is, 1,000, 1,500 emails, then the algorithm has learned what you're interested in, and then can present you with that universe of emails. And where Skadi really gets to work is in what we call the second level reviews. So the relevant emails have been pulled out, or e-coms have been pulled out, and then we're going in and looking at those again with a fresh pair of eyes, but more from a kind of practitioner manual perspective, going in and looking in to those emails and seeing what has been said. And in particular, it's not just what's been said, but of course it's all of the attachments that are attached to those emails, because often we find that's where the best kind of paper trail can be. So to give you an example of what I'm talking about, going back to a trader that knowingly is aware that there are particular features of an instrument or a security that they're transacting in, and on a first pass they may present a paper for trade approval to their superior, and then when you find the second or third version of that paper and you do a kind of version comparison of the two, some of those key features have been left off the later memo. And you have to ask yourself the question, well, why is that the case? Why have those features been left off? Is it because they're irrelevant, not important to the matter at hand? Or is it because actually someone didn't want those features to be shown, to be people to be made aware of them because it wouldn't help their case? And it can be the former, it can be the latter. Obviously, if it's the latter, can be a problem. And so it's that kind of thing that we're trying to look at. And again, that's just a sampling situation, getting to that relevant set of email universe. It's the same when you're looking at data. And as I said, the statistical analysis, getting to that pool of data to find the kind of things that you're actually interested in looking at. Again, it's just trying to sift through and getting to the relevant things.
Yeah, actually, that you sort of remind me of the rogue trading presentation that I put together, well, that you put together a while, that I've given a few times, looking at the three main, Jerome Kerviel, Kwaku Adeboli, and Nick Leeson. If people are up to no good, they tend to be relatively IT savvy, so they tend to know how to hide their tracks, or they know how to send emails off here and there to try and sort of confuse and can trip people up as they might come to look at what's going on. So, that's very interesting to hear.
That's exactly right, because I think it was Kerviel, wasn't it, who went out to different control staff each time, and he rotated the products that he traded so that he wouldn't run into the same kind of people. But also, it's like anything, if you're presented with a situation for the first time, it's a learning process, isn't it? So if you're going to go to a different person each time, then they're always going to be chances are they're going to be a novice in what you're looking at, and that's always going to help the corrupt individual, such as a rogue trader, trying to undertake that kind of activity.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And how do you, is there a way to sort of measure how well you've done, as it were? Is there a way to benchmark what, is an investigation will take place and then it gets to the end and hopefully has been deemed a success? Is there any way that that's measured? Obviously, my assumption is the reporting of that investigation goes normally to quite high levels within financial institutions. Is that correct? And possibly even to regulators?
Yeah, I mean, whenever we are working now on any kind of investigation, we always operate under the assumption that any reporting that we do, any report that we write, is going to potentially end up in a number of different hands. We operate a lot of the time working and reporting into board level people. Can be the supervisory board, can be the management board, etc. It often is, it's certainly going to the heads of the department that you work in. We work for heads of internal audit, we work for heads of compliance. That usually goes up, to their level, and also to the other investigative functions. There may be different investigative functions within financial institutions that come together as one anti-financial crime group and share their findings between each other. So already you can see that your reporting is shared internally within the institution with a number of people. But if the matter is serious enough, and often, we've had situations where we've been working with external counsel for a financial institution where, the law firm is acting for the financial institution, advising them because they are having some interaction with the regulators, for example. And we are acting effectively as the subject matter experts, advising both the law firm and the financial institution on the kind of things that we are seeing that's occurred around the particular transactions or products that we're looking into. And that's a situation where, of course, law firms, that's I guess I wouldn't say their bread and butter, but of course they're highly experienced at writing these kind of reports that are going to go forward to the regulator. But we have input into those reports as well, and it's very, very important that you are aware that that's where your reporting is going to end up. And we've also had a situation where something that we investigated a number of years ago then ended up, that report ended up in the pages of the Wall Street Journal, so in the media, for example. And again, you can't control where people could send, some report that you've had a hand in writing. So obviously it's paramount each time that we operate with our eyes wide open, that this is potentially what could happen. And you therefore have to be, very, very careful, but also, confident in the things that you are finding in your findings and the things that you are reporting.
Very interesting. Thank you. And given this sort of strange post-COVID world that we live in, I think, or do you think that, there could be issues for investigations going forward because there may well be sort of control gaps while people have had to work from home and they've had all that possible break in recorded lines that could become an issue?
You've certainly seen the regulators warning about it, right? So over in the States, in the UK, the regulators are warning about just that and saying to financial institutions, you need to have got your controls in order by now. And of course, we were thinking that potentially the virus might be a 6-month affair, things might come back to normal. We're experiencing now that we're sort of going into almost like a double dip lockdown, if you like, and so there is more chance and more activity of things going wrong as people transact at home. They're in there may be very, very strong and robust controls around recording of calls, of logging of transactions, and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, if you are in a household where there's a number of people operating, things like preventing insider dealing and so on and so forth, that's going to be very, very difficult to manage. So there are real challenges out there that potentially, we may find ourselves looking at in the future. What I can observe is that of our businesses with the virus, investigations is the one that has been absolutely virus proof, if you like. It's been absolutely robust. It has carried on because people will always need to investigate these kinds of problems. You can't simply park them and say, oh, we'll look at them in 12 months' time. It's not possible. You're under regulatory demands to look at stuff. At the end of the day, if you're a financial institution, you want to know what's gone wrong because you don't want more of this activity occurring. So there's always a drive to look at investigations. The difference between that and, say, the review and control business, which, as I mentioned, is like our second most important business, that's a business that I expect to come back very, very hard for Skadi in the next 18 to 24 months as people return to normality and need to start looking through, what has occurred, how do we strengthen things?
Yeah.
If this happens again in the future, how would we operate differently, etc. And then in the case of the expert witness side, that has been interesting in that there was effectively a slowdown when we went into lockdown as the courts effectively had to kind of work out the new way of operating. And now, we are back functioning. We've had a case just recently, all conducted in camera, if you like, but in court. And that is been the perfectly acceptable norm. So that business, continuing and carrying on. But as I say, investigation certainly has been the thing that has carried on through. Just sort of, thinking about why this business has been successful for us. And I have to say, for me, it is the most interesting work that we do, I think. I really do enjoy sort of getting in and helping people, but really looking at the kind of challenging problems that we're faced with. There may be a certain amount of repetition because you see patterns in behavior and patterns in techniques, but quite often, you are coming into stuff that's really very, very new. We have, operating in London as we do, and obviously very mindful of Brexit, but for all of your and my trading careers, and you and I have worked for a Dutch bank, I've worked for an American bank, I've worked for a German bank, I worked for another American bank. We have encountered through our careers multilingual people. If you remember, the very first place I worked, Barings, the emerging markets bank or the emerging markets broker, why I think we were particularly good is that if you went to the Turkish desk, there was the Turkish salesman, Turkish national, selling to the customers of Barings, and the same on the Greek desk, etc., the Portuguese desk, and so on and so forth. And you've always had those languages, and the French banks have always been historically very, very good at derivatives and structured products. And Skadi has really done well at bringing in experienced multilingual market practitioners to help the customers. So we have, just at the moment, we are operating with Italian speakers, we're operating with Spanish speakers, and we're operating with French speakers at the moment in various different cases that we have that we're conducting at the moment. And the other thing too is looking into a situation. Quite often, I can think of one particular bank that we help, which has a very, very traditional and conservative approach, and tends to have people that tend to stay in that institution for a very long time. They tend not to be people that move around the city, changing job to job. And that can be very, very positive, obviously, for the longevity of the firm, but it also can have negatives because it's very hard for that firm, or it is a challenge for that firm, to actually benchmark what activity is occurring across the street. And so when we come in, as a Skadi with, 4 or 5 investigators working with that bank, the great thing is that those investigators themselves, like myself, I've worked in 4 or 5 institutions, and the other people around the table have as well. You're bringing in a wealth of experience of not just, all of your knowledge going back throughout your career, but also how the treatment has been at the different institutions that you have worked in. over time. And that's very, very helpful, particularly when you're trying to step back in time and assess, what was happening. We do look at stuff that has been occurring during the financial crisis. And after the financial crisis, there were a lot of changes, a lot of regulatory change brought in. And so you had risk management departments, you had finance departments, really trying to rip apart new regulations and think, okay, how does this apply to the capital that we are going to allocate to these trades? What do these trades actually look like? What is the treatment that we should be used? Because nothing is that simple in the financial markets. It's a wonderful world if you can look at a trading desk and go, oh, they trade X, therefore it's really simple. We know what their RWA is, etc. These are some of the most innovative people working on the planet, but particularly in the United Kingdom. They're innovators. They're trying to do things to help people to provide liquidity, provide innovative structures, and it often means that you can be pouring through as the finance function, pouring through pages of regulations from the regulator, and it's very hard to kind of put that round pin in that square hole on that deck you've got in front of you. And that's when the kind of argy-bargy comes in, where people are trying to argue, well, no, the features of this particular product means that it has to have that treatment because they're X, Y, and Z, and so on and so forth. So again, it's when people are encountering that for the first time, you can see why people may make missteps, may make errors, and also when people may just frankly game the system.
But yeah, I can see why, we've made a name for ourselves also in the expert witness with those subject matter experts that can sort of reconstruct what it was like to be trading that product at that time. Because you might look at stuff today and go, well, that seems slightly odd, but actually that was the way that things were traded across all banks. It wasn't just it was one specific thing, one specific bank doing something nefarious. It's just that was the way that product traded at the time, and that was seen as standard and normal market practice. So I
was going to say that's an interesting point, Damian, because one of the things I've often look at in the and it's funny how all of our businesses are interrelated, because I can talk about investigations, but the fact is Skadi is a very investigative firm in everything that we do, whether it's expert witness, whether it's review and control. It doesn't really matter. We're always trying to get to the guts of a problem, and that involves some kind of investigation. And one of the things that I find really fascinating as a topic, and I was sound a bit of a spot at this stage, but it's new product approval and new transaction approval, because of course new product approval is one of those things where you're using that forum, you're using that platform to get all of the control functions together to look at a new business or a new product, whatever it happens to be, a new way of transacting. And with all the best will in the world, you can't know what's going to happen with this product through its life cycle. You have a fairly good idea because you might launch something with a particular purpose, but you can't then fathom for some structured products trader that then's going to have a look at that product that's been set up and gone, I can utilize that. I could take that, I could securitize that, I could wrap it up, I could put this wrap around it, this second wrap around it, and I've got another product. But you know what? All of those things have gone through a new products approval, so I'm fine. Everything's approved by the financial institution, but probably not this thing that they've created. And I always think that those approval processes could do with a kind of, a look back. 2 years into the life cycle of a product and just review, we approved this product on the basis of these assumptions. Have these assumptions, been found to have been correct? I mean, would people have liked to have had a look back at collateralized debt obligations, in the 2008 crisis, for example, because, you don't know the problems with a product until it gets stress tested.
Yeah, absolutely. And just before we finish up, at the end of an investigation, what tends to happen then, and where can we show that we as a firm have added value to an institution?
I thought you were going to ask me about the after investigation party, which I can't say whether that is a feature, but sometimes you have been in, but truthfully, you are in something for a very, very long period of time, or you can be potentially. I mean, the shortest investigations, we've done a piece of verification work for a compliance department that was being put in front of the regulators, and that work took 3 weeks. And that was very, very unusual, actually, because quite often we can be in something that may take a number of months to put together, to understand and to see. But really what's important is obviously, the report has to be written, as we've explained, but it's really then what are the lessons learned? How does the bank take forward what you've discovered and then apply that to, what's been missed? And that's why it's interesting depending on where different investigative functions are set up. Because as I say, we work with some that are part of the internal audit function, and they're very, very interested with, what particular controls have been missed, what are the gaps, etc. Has the routine front to back audits that have gone on in this business missed these things because they've been scoped in a particular way that has meant that they haven't looked at this area. And then it can be that they are functions that are run out of legal and compliance, which are very much more interested with what are the legal ramifications, what are the regulatory things that have occurred, etc., etc. So it's very, very important to sort of think about what are the things that they can take forward from this. Are there some very direct control gaps and learnings that can be taken forward, and then something that we wouldn't have any impact on, but something that we do very much use as a tool of measurement is at the end of the day, if there has been wrongdoing, then a bonus clawback, for example, for the compensation of the people that are involved can be initiated. And thus far, based on the work that we've done, there's been more than $10 million worth of bonus clawbacks initiated against people that we've looked at through our investigations. And it's, again, I think you're asking me how do you benchmark your success? It's very, very difficult, but I think that's the only real measure that I can give to people of the impact, apart from the fact of having a number of repeat customers that enjoy working with Skadi and utilising us, and we very much enjoy continuing to help them.
Brilliant. Nic, thank you very much for that. That was certainly very informational for myself, and hopefully will be very informative for our listeners too. Thank you.
Great stuff. Thanks very, very much, Damian. Keep well.
Thank you for listening to episode 8 of the Skadi podcast. Stick with us on this journey as we, like many of you, are trying to navigate these very uncertain times. This is the Skadi podcast.